Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, and I am actually coming to you from Ottawa. I actually have to do an event beginning that's actually starting at 6:30. I'm going to be a bit late. So I'm going to have to be tight today with the hour. And there's, of course, fortunately, unfortunately, many important developments in Canadian foreign policy. And so I'm going to get right to it. First of all, there's a report that the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a critical look at Canada's role in the world, and we're coming up to around like 85, 90 weekly sessions. So there's a report about how Alberta's energy industry's methane emissions are 50% below, or 50% higher than was previously understood. A further reason to shut down the tar sands, we should have shut the tar sands down a long time ago, and they contribute to Canada's immense per capita greenhouse gas emissions that are causing increasing destruction around the world. The U.S. ambassador, after the Canadian Parliamentary Committee said that there should be a open bidding process for the new surveillance aircraft. It's going to cost between $6 and $10 billion. The U.S. ambassador sent a letter to all Liberal cabinet ministers urging them to move ahead with the sole source Boeing P-8 surveillance aircraft. So Bombardier, Montreal company, and some of its, components or some of its allies in the industry were pushing for their ability to put in a bid to provide the aircraft. And the U.S. ambassador is pressing the Liberal government to just go with the American company at somewhere between $6 and $10 billion, huge outlay to the U.S. military industrial complex. There's a story in the business section of the Globe and Mail about a new book about financial crimes, and basically how Canada is very favorable to companies hiding illicit money, avoiding tax, et cetera, And this is something we've known for a long time. Very permissive, almost like a tax haven. And Canada's played an important role in shaping the Caribbean tax havens as well. There's a story about Barrick Gold, and another employee was killed at their operations in Mali. And the story talked about how that's the 5th this year and 13th employee that's died at the mining company, biggest gold mining company in Canada, since the new CEO took over a couple of years ago. And basically, the story talks about how Barrick is particularly bad with regards to safety standards and its workforce, and they're particularly bad with every standard, as we've talked about previously on the show. The Ottawa Citizen had a piece titled "Canadian Special Forces to Again Train African Troops Despite Concerns About Such Soldiers Previously Overthrowing Civilian Governments." So the Operation Flintlock, the Canadian Special Forces have been involved with for, I think, most of a decade, or a bit more than a decade even now. That seems to be going forward. And again, training other countries' militaries, particularly kind of impoverished countries or weaker countries, it's in large part about influence. How that plays out, it can sometimes be a bit unclear, but from the Canadian military and Canadian foreign policy perspective, influence with other countries' military has long been a central objective of military training. And that goes back to post-decolonization period in Africa and trying to have influence with the military, the former British-created militaries and including even in helping to overthrow Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. There's, I think last week or the week before, we talked about a big globe expose about supposed forced Uyghur labor in the seafood industry, and this Washington-based NGO that's been looking at the matter. They have another story in the Globe titled "High Liner Cuts Ties with Seafood Supplier After Probe." And it basically goes at a bunch of Canadian firms, Walmart, some others, Walmart Canada, and basically targets them for purportedly getting seafood from Chinese vessels that use forced Uyghur labor. And in the US, there's stories really pushing this idea that all products from Xinjiang or in any way associated with Xinjiang should be associated with forced labor. But now we're not even in Xinjiang, but also just the seafood industry, which Chinese companies are apparently big players in. Now they're trying to basically criminalize purchasing seafood from these Chinese companies. And this is just part of this broader perspective of demonize China, break relations with China, try to weaken China as part of the U.S. Strategy. Now, there was meetings at the APEC summit in San Francisco this week, and it does seem that there was a little bit of a dialing down of U.S.-China tensions, which is, I think, a good thing. Again, President Xi, the Chinese president, he spoke to a big corporate U.S. corporate audience. And further example of this point I've made many times, where it's these corporate profit-seeking businesses that, in fact, are kind of on the better side on the China issue. It's the neocon militarist hawks that are the more dangerous, and they're just wanting to make money and profit and exploit. That segment of the establishment is the less egregious, dangerous element when it comes to China, and we see that play out. And President Xi, when he was in San Francisco, was clearly trying to heighten those divisions within the ruling class of the U.S., where there's still big segments of corporate U.S., same thing with corporate Canada, that want to continue business relations with China. The Globe had a piece about how Canada and Taiwan are signing a unique foreign investment arrangement, where they are going to be a sort of a FIPA agreement, a foreign investment promotion protection agreement with Taiwan, even though there's actually, Canada doesn't really recognize Taiwan, so it's a little bit, the legality of the accord is sort of questioned, but the story makes very clear that the point is to support Taiwan as part of this geopolitical tension with China. The Globe and Mail reported that one of the two Michaels that China detained after Canada detained Meng Wanzhou, the executive from Huawei, at the behest of the U.S. government. That one Michael is suing the other Michael for basically spying and getting him put into jail. And this, of course, was something that many people on the left were saying, that the Michaels were probably engaged in spying, and of course the Chinese claimed that. And now looks like that's turned out to be true, when it was very much, people on the left were really demonized for saying that these were supposed to be our innocent Michaels, but in fact it seems like there was more to it, and it speaks to the whole Meng Wanzhou case. It was just a total horrible decision by the Canadian government. It was designed by the Americans to basically heighten tensions between Canada and China. And quite frankly, it was successful. It succeeded in deepening tensions, and it wasn't in Canada's interest. It's not in Canada's at least important segments of business interest, and I would say more broadly cultural, even for that matter, ecological interest in having growing tensions with China, but the detention of Meng Wanzhou at the behest of the U.S. for a really dubious claim of breaking sanctions with regards to Iran, that this was really a total error and quite a bad decision on behalf of segments of the Trudeau government. There's a story about how where a former UN Assistant Secretary General, former general in Germany's army, did a piece where he looked at what happened with regards to the peace negotiations early in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and basically further confirms something we knew, which is that the Americans and the British sabotaged those negotiations, which has led to huge tens and tens of thousands more people being killed. There was an agreement around staying neutral, Ukraine staying neutral, and Russia withdrawing, except for Crimea. And the Americans and British who want this proxy war, they work to sabotage that. A Canadian was killed recently in fighting in Ukraine, Indigenous Canadian, and there's a story in the Globe titled "Canadian Killed Fighting in Ukraine, Lived His Life Unselfishly," Chief says. And so clearly there's some Indigenous Canadians that went to fight in the NATO proxy war. And I talk about that in my left-right book about how often Indigenous Canadians have been absorbed into the militarist, imperialist foreign policy of Canada. And we saw that actually, or some of that, or another side to that, with Indigenous Remembrance Day, which takes place 3 days before November 11th. I think it's on November 8th, maybe it's 9th. I'm pretty sure it's November 8th. And a whole bunch of prominent Indigenous commentators. I was looking at Tanya Tagalog, who's a columnist in the Globe and Mail, who writes very hard line, good criticism of Canadian colonialism and the dispossession of First Nations. She basically is just a celebratory of Indigenous people fighting as part of Canada in World War I, during World War II in Burma, and propping up the British Empire. And there's like a total disconnect between their role in British imperialism, Canada's ties to British imperialism, and that being part of a process, of course, of their own dispossession. And you see that a lot, and that's part of why the military has gotten behind Indigenous Remembrance Day, because it's like a way to feed the sort of concern around reconciliation and establishment reconciliation within the militarist imperialist lens of Canada. And in fact, celebrate how Indigenous people were overrepresented fighting with Canada during World War I, which of course was a horror imperial war. So you see that a little bit, at least in this Globe Mail piece. There's a story in today's Globe Mail that says Canada must do everything possible to combat Russia's abduction of Ukrainian children. And this whole question, and one of the co-authors is with the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, which is Erwin Kotler's group, which is a group that openly celebrates Israel's slaughter, right? They were one of the co-sponsors of the demonstration in Toronto last week, celebrating, what Israel's doing. And so you have 6,000 Palestinian children killed by Israel. And this organization is making that it supports that, taking, babies off of incubators, forcing newborns off of incubators. And they're talking about how Canada has to do everything to deal with the question of Russia taking Ukrainian children. Now, I don't think that I think Russia taking Ukrainian children there's a lot of problems with that. I don't believe it's genocidal. I don't believe it. I don't think that that's actually, I think it does contravene the rules of war. And in fact, that's why Putin has been brought to the International Criminal Court, which again is part of this wild double standard. You have 6,000 Palestinian children killed in 40 days by the IDF, and no Israeli officials being brought, and yet 19,000 Russian children are brought, or Ukrainian children are brought to Russia. And there isn't really evidence. I haven't seen evidence presented that they're, being mistreated. I mean, the claim is that they're being Russified, which a lot of these kids probably were ethnic Russians, Russian-speaking Ukrainians. And a lot of them are all kinds of complicated family dynamics that explain why they've been brought to Russia. But it speaks to this incredible double standard, and they're just a hypocrisy. Somebody from Roland Wahlberg Center writing that in the Globe and Mail, just no self-reflection. Bill Blair, our defense minister at the Halifax Security Forum, he said, "We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, with whatever it takes." That was my message to the Canadian Congress rally in Halifax today. Canada's support for Ukraine is unwavering and rock solid. So he spoke at a rally in Halifax now during this neocon summit that is the Halifax Security Forum, funded by the Canadian military. It's based in Washington. They do an annual summit. All the most hawkish, militarist, imperialist, U.S.-aligned characters from around the world get together, and the Ukrainian Canadian Congress used that as an opportunity to hold a demonstration, which makes a lot of sense. I saw a piece, a lot of these sort of establishment journalists that Global News' Mercedes Stevenson, I believe is her name. She's there in Halifax. She interviews that Iranian woman activist who's one of the most widely cited Iranian critics. Blanking on her name, with big curly hair. She claims that the Iranians would try to kill her in Brooklyn and stuff like that. It's just this total softball interview, just this total militarist, target Iran kind of interview. Nothing at all critical, even though she's well connected to the U.S. and there's just none of this appears in the Global News' interview. Now, the Halifax Security Forum, as they gave their annual award to the people of Israel. That's what they announced. The people of Israel after the October 7th Hamas attack. And I would have given it to the people of Palestine. I think the people of Palestine, people of Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, would be much more deserving. If you go into more and more stuff's coming out about the attack. Now, Hamas clearly killed. There were Hamas fighters that clearly killed civilians. That happened. But the Haaretz is reporting now that the Israelis did kill some Israelis. The Israeli military killed some Israelis during the rave. They reported that Hamas actually didn't know the rave was happening. The rave was supposed to end the day before, but got extended the last minute. The IDF okayed extending the rave last minute. So Hamas didn't even know it was happening. And so there's more and more evidence that yes, Hamas fighters definitely violated the laws of war, but a high proportion, far higher proportion than Israel's of combats to civilians, right? It was about around half of the people were IDF soldiers. The first thing that Hamas did was they attacked the IDF bases. They attacked the IDF security infrastructure around their prison. And there's significant evidence that Israel killed a proportion. It's not clear how many of the Israelis that have been killed were actually killed in the very aggressive Israeli response, which has a whole bunch of elements to it. Obviously, just to be fair to the Israeli military, it's always difficult to in war there are civilian casualties that do happen even when you're not trying to, of course, but also that they didn't want Hamas to get kidnap more people, because that's part of the power of, it's a bargaining chip. That's what Hamas was looking for in large part, was bargaining chips to get the 10,000 or so Palestinians who were detained hostages in Israeli jails. The shifting to the question of Palestine and the resistance, we're seeing continued resistance this week across Canada. That's wonderful resistance, huge demonstration. Again, in Montreal, it's now been I don't know, 4 weeks, 5 weeks in a row. I think it's 5 weeks now. There was 15,000, I'd say, at least in Montreal for that demonstration. I know in Toronto, there's big demonstrations. Many other cities. There was a really good direct action at the Giller Prize ceremony in Toronto. That Scotiabank is the big sponsor for the literary prize, and they got on stage. They had people in the audience make a good talk about how Scotiabank has $500 million in Elbit, the Israeli arms company. Really good action. It was even Rick Mercer tried to pull the placard of one of the activists, which was actually a good thing because he ripped. He looked like a real jerk, and the part he ripped didn't even have the words. And even when the initial guy got on stage, he had his sign upside down, which in principle would obviously be a bad thing, but he at some point realized it and flipped it. And also the slogan was simple enough that you could read it upside down, which just adds a little bit to the dynamism of the thing. The police went all in, and they're like trying to charge three, or they put them in jail, I think, for like 24 hours, trying to charge three of them. There's a big letter signed by lots of the writers defending them, saying throw away these charges, and speaking out for a ceasefire and critical of Israeli colonization. So that caught a lot of media attention, got live on TV, and put the Scotiabank issue. There was another significant demonstration on Thursday, I think, in Toronto at Scotiabank's office on the issue. The parliamentary petition for a ceasefire that Alexandre Bourris sponsored. It's the biggest petition in Canadian Parliament history. I think it's now towards 300,000 people have signed it. Pierre Poilievre, one of his events in London, Ontario, was disrupted repeatedly on Palestine. There's I've seen a whole bunch of actions, MPs' offices across the country, MPs being questioned. Wab Kinew, the NDP leader in Manitoba, he's asked about why he won't call for a ceasefire. Very good video of questioning him, and then he kind of claims these people are trivial. They say, well, 5,000 Palestinian children be killed. If 10,000 are dead, well, then you call for a ceasefire. And then he takes the moral, that's trivializing their deaths. So the person who won't call for a ceasefire has the audacity to say those who are pressing on the issue, they're trivializing by raising this question of what's the threshold at which a ceasefire will be called. And also the other NDP provincial premier has yet to call for a ceasefire out in BC. There was also a rallies and a press event for this notice of intention to seek prosecution of Mélanie Joly, Justin Trudeau, Marie-Claude Bibeau, the National Revenue Minister, and the Justice Minister, Attorney General Arif, to seek for their role in aiding and abetting Israel's war crimes. It was launched with a rally in Toronto at the Justice Minister's office, at the PMO's office in Ottawa. I brought the letter of intent to Mélanie Joly's office, and then people in Sherbrooke, half dozen Palestinians in Sherbrooke, brought it to the Marie-Claude Bibeau's office. It was actually pretty significant rallies in Toronto and Ottawa on this issue. And basically, it's a lawyer, Shane Martinez, who's been doing really good stuff on Canadian charities supporting the IDF, on the foreign recruitment question, Israel groups that are getting Canadians to support the Israeli military. And he's basically began the process of seeking their prosecution, and which ultimately, hopefully, would be brought to the International Criminal Court. The Attorney General would have to okay it domestically, so it's very unlikely that the Attorney General would do that. But eventually, this could get its way to the International Criminal Court, and they're building the case. And there's a really fascinating thing on this, is that so the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute organized, there was these rallies and bringing to the different ministers' offices, and then there was a press conference a couple hours later to kind of give the background on this issue and the legal question and all that. And a whole bunch of corporate media showed up, right? It was like 10 different corporate journalists that like registered. And basically none of them did anything on it. So it's like they all knew that this was like an kind of like an important story, but then when it gets down to it, the media block is such that to say that Canada's Canadian politicians are aiding and abetting genocide and war crimes, that's a step too far for most of the media outlets. The coverage, there was some left-wing coverage, a lot of international, Al Jazeera Arabic, long piece on it, a lot of international Palestine-related media, a whole bunch of it, international coverage, Rabo, left-wing Canadian media. And then the people in Sherbrooke were successful in getting Radio Canada and TVA to come with them when they gave the legal notice to the revenue minister in Sherbrooke. So a hyper local kind of angle, but the sort of broader legalistic national angle, the media both simultaneously said they thought it was interesting, so they all registered, a whole bunch of registered, but then didn't come through with actually covering the issue. The question of where this resistance is going, it's clearly, this is the most international solidarity activism, obviously pro-Palestinian activism, and I would say anti-war activism since at least 2003. That's for sure, by a large margin, maybe even more than 2003, against the Iraq War. And one of the things we're really seeing is that it's this generational element is just getting starker and starker. So basically younger people they're critical of Israel, they're critical of Zionism, big generational divide. And one of the ways you see it is this, what's going on at McGill. So McGill, there's a resolution being put forward, titled something like the No to Genocide in Palestine resolution, or something to that effect, Genocide Palestine, I know we're in there. And the Globe or the Montreal Gazette has this front page piece where basically it strongly implies that the Israel groups on campus have just given up. So they're not even trying to like engage in the referendum. It seems all they're doing is trying to pressure the student union to just throw the referendum resolution out, and they're trying to pressure with outside forces, of course. They're trying to pressure the administration of the university to pressure the student union that they're going to like cut their funding. They're going to cut their whole relationship, the name relationship between SSMU and the university, which has all these implications with funding. They can't directly cut the funding; it's complicated. But they essentially try to threaten the funding of the student union, and that's what they have left. Right, that's what they have left, because they know, as happened 2 years ago at McGill, the Palestine Solidarity Resolution passed with a large majority, right? So even at McGill, generally more conservative university, these resolutions are now the student body is way further along on these issues, and there's a whole big panic about TikTok. Okay, so about how, because apparently there's numbers about like how many pro-Palestinian message on TikTok versus pro-Israel messages, like 100 billion, or 107, I think it was, billion pro-Palestinian, like 7 billion pro-Israel. So it's just like overwhelming. And so the Zionist lobby is starting to go at TikTok really hard. And TikTok is apparently really concerned, because TikTok's, of course, a Chinese-owned company that's been targeted by like Republican anti-Chinese forces within the US. And now it seems like there's this melding of the anti-Chinese and the Zionist forces to go at TikTok, and TikTok's very nervous they're going to get banned in the US because of this. And TikTok, there's this headline. It says TikTok says it's not the algorithm. Teens are just pro-Palestine. So they organize this big thing, front page of the New York Times, Jewish celebrities confront TikTok over anti-Semitism on site. So like Sacha Baron Cohen who's a total racist, who doesn't even have a TikTok account, is going on about the anti-Semitism on TikTok. And this New York Times piece points out that the two TikTok executives that they meet with, it's all these Jewish celebrities meeting with, both of the TikTok executives are Jewish. So as a way to blunt being accused of being anti-Semitic, TikTok hires Jewish executives to sort of blunt that attack. But it's ongoing, and they're trying to basically shut it down because as they say, the teens are pro-Palestine. There's also a big freak out about some postering that happened in Toronto and Montreal. So in a Starbucks was posted, some signs put on a Starbucks about their role in Israeli dispossession and violence against Palestinians. And the Israel lobby had a huge kerfuffle, supposedly a big anti-Semitic incident. And then the person who put up the posters, who said she just pasted them to the window. It's like, and she wrote some message, genocide something. It's all can be, just taken off like in 2 seconds. It's nothing permanent. And they got her charged. And she took ownership of it. She did a TikTok. It went viral. She jokes, mocks these Zionist lobbyists who are having a panic about this huge anti-Semitic incident, according to them. And she just takes ownership. But the Toronto police have apparently arrested her. We'll see where this goes. And simultaneously in Montreal, people put on the metros, people put posters saying genocide in Palestine, Canada complicit. And they got the pro-Israel folks got the hate crime, Montreal hate crimes unit of the police to investigate this supposed hate crime, to say that there's a genocide in Palestine and Canada's complicit. It's just beyond ridiculous. And the woman who did this in Toronto did her video just mocking the freak out about posting on Starbucks is pretty funny. I posted my Twitter. There's a big push the pro-Israel Jewish groups to make it easier to criminalize condoning, denying, or downplaying the Holocaust. So the Liberal government, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, brought in legislation to sort of criminalize downplaying or denying the Nazi Holocaust. And as the story in the Canadian Press story makes really clear, that this is really just all about Israel, right? They weave in some Israel examples. It's just all about creating this climate of criminalizing Palestine solidarity, just like with TikTok. Obviously, there are genuinely anti-Semitic comments that are made. They are, there should be a process with TikTok and other social media companies to deal with that. But this is not what's going on here. This is about demonizing Palestine solidarity. And there was an incident with some of the Israel lobby groups in Canada went at Twitter this week, and Elon Musk did some of this where one day he tweets out this like white replacement kind of theory, far right kind of anti-Jewish theory, and so he sort of endorses that, and then the next day, then there's some advertisers that IBM and other companies that withdraw their advertising. There's been a lot of push on Twitter on that, and Elon Musk around that over the last bit. And then the next day he says that saying the slogan from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's genocidal. And then the head of the ADL, the pro-Israel group, the B'nai B'rith in the US, he comes out and endorses Elon Musk. So when Elon Musk is saying getting a lot allied with right-wing anti-Jewish kind of forces, that's okay, so long as he targets clamps down on the Palestine solidarity crowd. There was also a bunch of examples of people being targeted for their Palestine solidarity. Resident doctor at I think University of Ottawa, Yingmin Ji, I think is his name, was suspended from his residency. The Toronto District School Board again targeted equity teacher, Javier, I'm forgetting his last name right now. This is the second time, again, for his Palestine solidarity. There was a huge kerfuffle about the head of the sexual assault center at the University of Alberta, questioning. She signed some statement questioning the whole business of Hamas raping Israelis. Now, I don't buy it. I don't buy there was any significant Hamas raping of Israelis. It does not make any sense that you're in this quick, speed military mission that the Hamas was clearly doing. They knew they didn't have much time. It doesn't make any sense to stop. It's possible, there was some one or two, I don't know, of Hamas fighters that did that. That's possible. But any idea that was in any way integral to what they're doing is just total illogical. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't believe the evidence is added up. Anyways, the University of Alberta fired the head of the sexual assault center for signing this letter. Yeah, but of course, the University of Alberta has all these endowments and these fellowships. I think $1.4 million worth to about a dozen individuals who fought in the Nazi SS, right? They're not going to move on that front. There's these like serious Nazi propagandists who they still have fellowships for, but they're not going to move on that. But the sexual assault center person who signs a Palestine solidarity statement, they'll go at her. Other examples, somebody at the Hamilton District School Board who put out a statement, 75 years of violent occupation and apartheid, and the expectation is that Palestinians will be passive observers in their genocide. She was suspended for stating that. And as Nora Loretta said, has a single Zionist lost their job for supporting ethnic cleansing? I don't know that they have, but there's a whole bunch of examples of people standing against genocide, against war, and for Palestinian liberation who have been targeted, suspended, fired, et cetera, et cetera. Justin Trudeau, finally, 40 days in, makes a statement that says that it's not a good idea to kill babies. And in response to that statement, the former Canadian ambassador to Israel, Vivian Bokonich, she called him explicitly. Justin Trudeau is and always has been an, quote, anti-Semite. In a whole bunch of the pro-Israel groups, didn't go quite as far, but strongly suggested he was anti-Semitic. In the Toronto Sun, Trudeau's Israel tirade hands Canada's anti-Semites a propaganda victory. So now Justin Trudeau, for a significant segment of the Israel lobby, is an anti-Semite, which of course means the word means nothing anymore. This is where they're going with this. Netanyahu, in response to the Prime Minister's comment, very mild comments, still hasn't called for a ceasefire. In his comments, he condemns Hamas, but he says that there's the images we're seeing of Israel killing, it doesn't even say Israel, but he implies it strongly, that the killing of babies and the hospitals and stuff, that this has to stop. Netanyahu responded aggressively and on Twitter, and he said, he concludes his statement to Trudeau in response saying, the forces of civilization must back Israel in defeating Hamas barbarism. So Israel is the forces of civilization. I watched this video of Bill Maher, that liberal American imperialist, that show, who a friend of mine in Vancouver, old friend, I clearly likes. And he did a whole thing about Israel being the outpost of civilization, and how this is a good thing, and the Palestine solidarity people are presenting it as a bad thing. And it's like, if this is, no wonder the rest of the world doesn't buy into this business of Western civilization. If what the forces of civilization is killing 6,000 children and demolishing tens and tens of thousands of structures, yeah, no wonder no one, with the exception of those doing the crimes and their allies, or their direct kind of allies, or close friends, the close perpetrators, maybe I should say. No wonder no one else in the world considers this business of Western civilization anything but a horrible exercise. Now, the Trudeau's comments caused a big ruffle, of course. I mentioned all the Israel lobby groups suggested he was anti-Semitic or stoking anti-Semitism or whatever in that direction. The Israel lobby, CIJA, put out, were very critical, put out an action alert to criticize Trudeau around this. They cited how both the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, both agree and bluntly and publicly push back against PM Trudeau's comments, which failed to recognize Israel's right to self-defense. People like within his caucus, Anthony Housefather, they criticized Trudeau. Housefather and some other MPs are in Israel now. They're part of this as part of a solidarity trip. And Housefather in the CBC article today is saying he wouldn't have used the language Trudeau used. Now, Michael Levitt and Housefather, Michael Levitt, now the former Liberal MP, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center head, he criticized, basically implied that Trudeau was an anti-Semite for his criticism of killing babies. And this reminds me of a big kerfuffle before, I think 2018 with Dimitri Lascaris, where he said this, he raised this question of Housefather and Levitt, whether they had, when Tariq Labani, the Palestinian-Canadian London, Ontario doctor, was shot. And I think Trudeau made a statement that's sort of, a little bit of solidarity with Labani, if I remember correctly. And he was criticized by Levitt and Housefather. And Dimitri said something about how they, Levitt and Housefather, have more loyalty to Netanyahu, Israel, than they do to their own party leader, their own, the prime minister, the leader of their party. And he got pillared all across the board. Jagmeet Singh, Trudeau, the head of the Conservatives, even Elizabeth May, they all jumped in and said, it's anti-Semitic trope, dual loyalty, I think it's pretty clear to say, Michael Levitt left the Liberals so he could go full-time in his apartheid and genocide promotion because he has more loyalty to Israel's apartheid and genocidal policies than he does to the Liberal Party. And Anthony Housefather has gone a certain way down that path. According to the CBC and the National, there's I'm forgetting if it's the Athia Raj, I'm forgetting her name now, former Huffington Post, now Toronto Star, one of the people on the Power and Politics panel, with Chantal Lambert and the Globe guy. I'm not sure which one it was. I think it might have been both of them saying that if Trudeau calls for a ceasefire, there's Liberal MPs that will resign. And presumably that's Anthony Housefather, and maybe that Yara Sachs in Toronto, and which, again, it speaks to this, they're more loyal to Israel than they are to Trudeau or the Liberal Party, so what they said in the Power Politics was that if it's not before, if Trudeau calls for a ceasefire before Joe Biden does. And so what one person on Twitter said, he said, quote, experts on Canadian state TV news say that if Justin Trudeau calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, then some members of his caucus will resign unless Joe Biden calls for a ceasefire first. Doesn't that show double foreign interference in Canadian politics? He's obviously sort of being joking, but it does sort of speaks to Israel's influence in Canadian politics and, of course, U.S. influence in Canadian politics. But we won't, there won't be any commissions into that question of foreign interference. It's taken a little longer. I had a bit more I was going to get into, but it's taken a bit longer, and I want to be done probably a few minutes before 7. So I think I'll just leave it at that. And if people have any questions, comments, I'm going to try to make Laura a co-host. Go ahead, Catherine. I think I've made you a co-host, Laura.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Catherine, if you want to unmute, let me. Catherine, can you unmute? For some reason, I'm not able to. Okay. Well, Catherine, you're not seeming to be able to unmute, so I think we'll go on to Danielle and, oh, there you are. Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. It wouldn't allow me to do that. I just wanted to thank Eve for talking about the security forum. I went to a demonstration yesterday with some folks from the area at the security forum, and it was not reported on CBC. There were, I don't know how many people there. I didn't count. Some people say hundreds, some thousands, somewhere in the middle of that. It was fantastic. There was wonderful energy, people of all ages, really nice, diverse group. People, Asaf Rashid spoke, Larry Hyven, and some other folks that I can't remember their last names, but and people were there for at least, we left, it started at noon and we left around 3, and people waited till the people from the security forum were coming out. We were across the street at Peace and Friendship Park, facing the Westin Hotel, and the police had blocked off one exit for the cars to go out, and there were, and a bunch of people went down like on that side and were chanting, and the organizer said, go ahead, go on the sidewalks, and kind of encouraged us to go to all the exits because people from the conference were trying to get out the back door and the side doors. And so they kind of trickled out slowly, and there was a good crowd of people on either side of the driveway as they left, chanting, and they had a good speaker on the other side of the road, and just really great energy. Lots of cops on bicycles and on foot, but they stayed back.
Well, yeah, we're glad you did it, Catherine. Thanks so much. I'm going to move on because we've got so many hands raised now, but thank you for doing that. Yay to you. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
I was curious, Mr. Angler, what's your take on? Well, let me say this first. I'm surprised that no groups in Canada are asking for to cut off diplomatic relations with Israel. Like, that seems like almost like the big pie in the sky. Like, if we got that, that would be like kind of pretty huge. I wonder what your take is. Like, would that be achievable? Is that a good goal?
Yeah, my take is that's a great call, but it's about 500 steps away. There's a whole bunch of things that are much more realistic as campaigns before that, and Canada is so tied into Israel that's not realistic. So there are countries where that has happened. Bolivia, I think 4 or 5, a few countries in Latin America in recent weeks, and obviously other countries in the Arab world previously and whatnot. But yeah, that's not a realistic campaign in Canada.
Okay, Gregory, go ahead.
Yes, Yves, what do you think of this effort to prosecute Trudeau and the ministers? How far do you think that will go? And I mean, I think the fact that we have the prosecution of a sitting prime minister and his ministers in the works, I think that's fantastic. And so what do you see?
I don't know the legal. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not, certainly no international law like that. Shane is a serious lawyer. He's a very competent lawyer. That's very clear. How the ICC, ultimately it needs to be a member state. So we can call on Bolivia, for instance, to bring Canada. to the ICC, but we can't, we could send 100,000 emails to or messages to the ICC, and that's not, it has to be a member state. But I know he's committed. They have a working group. It's part of this initiative from Britain and they had in Britain, they got the former the lawyer there got the British court to the former Israeli foreign minister, defense minister, to bring in to arrest her when she came to UK. Ultimately, the British government has some way of superseding the order of the court, but they had a real step forward in that, holding them legally accountable. But I don't know enough to know. I think it's definitely a good political initiative. I don't know how strong the legal grounding of the whole exercise is, but it's certainly something that we should support politically. And I know that Shane is serious, and there is a lot of evidence of Canada's aiding and abetting. So no.
Okay, Hans, you're up.
Thank you, Yves, for picking up on the actual investigation of what happened on October the 7th. One of the first hostages to be released, an 85-year-old Mrs. Lifshitz, was pointing out that a lot of the people that she saw getting killed were killed by friendly fire. And this afternoon, I got a TRNN message with the Chris Hedges report, where he has Max Blumenthal investigating this topic in greater detail. And it just goes to show how the lying machine, where Washington becomes a surrogate liar for the Zionist regime, how this was instantly amplified with echoes of the first Gulf War, where they had the crib baby deaths allegedly at the hands of Saddam's forces, which turned out to be an entire Hill and Knowlton fabrication. But it's worthwhile recalling that a month ago, it was mandatory for even progressives calling.
I'm sorry. I have like 2 minutes left. I really got to go. So
okay.
Okay.
So I just wanted to point out that this Chris Hedges report amplifies what you were cutting at earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Hans. Okay, Yuri, can you unmute? Go ahead, Yuri.
I don't think I'm going to have time.
You don't think you're going to have time
for all three, though. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
So maybe just Yuri, you can be the last questioner. Sorry, Philippa and Anne, but we're running out of time. Go ahead, Yuri.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yves, your response to this far-right dingbat that won in Argentina and the history of Canada's support for Argentine far-right movements and whatnots.
Yeah, I don't know much about Miley. I know he seems very, far right. I don't know much about it. And there's, not a whole lot about Canada's role. Recently they've supported the neoliberal, the previous president. They really supported him. Macri, I believe his name. But Canada hasn't had, there's big Canadian mining in Argentina, and there've been lots of conflicts with local communities. But I don't know how involved Canada's been at the sort of bigger picture geopolitical level with Argentina. I think I can maybe do really quickly, Philippa, if you have a very specific question.
Can you unmute, Philippa? I'm trying to, but I can't. Philippa, can you unmute, please? You're not able to. I don't know why I'm keep clicking it, but sorry, Philippa, but we can't hear you.
Go ahead, Anne.
Okay, go ahead, Anne.
Hi, thank you. I just wondered if you think the all the people in the street is making a difference, if that influenced Trudeau's slightly different tact.
Unequivocally, and it's not just all the people in the street; it's all the people do the petitions, and I think specifically the people chasing him out of restaurants and chasing other politicians out, and the occupations of the Scotiabank or the CIBC, Scotiabank, and the Giller Prize. It's this constant, it's breaking through, it's disruption, it's all the different kind of stuff like that. The walkouts at universities, clearly he's feeling pressure. Clearly, all kinds of liberal MPs, particularly those that have significant Arab or Muslim constituencies, they're feeling it. They're feeling it. I mean, it's incredible how much work had to be done to get him to just say that, it's not good to kill babies. I mean, that seems to be a pretty baseline kind of position, but that's, it is what it is.
Okay, so I guess you don't have time for Felipe, is that right?
Quickly, Felipe.
Go ahead, Felipe.
I can't unmute. I don't think I, oh, am I
We hear you
unmuted?
fine. Yeah, we hear you fine.
Oh, no, actually, I just very quickly wanted to know who actually said that if Trudeau, what was it you said? If Trudeau calls for a ceasefire, some members of his caucus will leave. Unless,
that was on the CBC and the Power and Politics on Thursday night. Where they have the three of them that did it. I don't forget which one, but the three made that comment. But that was on the CBC Power and Politics on the national. Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Eve.
Take care.
Thank you, Eve. Bye. Bye.